Nothing will ever be as good as the first Iron Man movie, right?
Wrong. Wrong.
A strategic analysis I commissioned confirms that James Gunn's Superman isn't just a better start for the DCU, it's a more impressive, more significant, and frankly, a more difficult achievement than the film that launched the MCU. Wait a minute, you don't believe me? Here's the most compelling stat you'll hear all day. While the first Iron Man was a box office success, a strategic report shows that Superman achieved profitability and outperformed all of its contemporary superhero competitors. In a superhero genre suffering from audience fatigue, it wasn't just a win, it was a strategic knockout. The common misconception, as many of you have pointed out, is that Superman wasn't a strong start because it didn't outdo Zack Snyder's Man of Steel by a wide enough margin. But that's a false equivalency. The 2013 film, while profitable, had a lukewarm 57% critic score and a 75% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, that's not the only metric we're going to look at, but it's an important one. Let's look at the launch of Iron Man. According to a 2005 SEC filing, Marvel Studios was in a precarious state. They borrowed a staggering $525 million from a consortium of banks to finance a slate of up to 10 films, while the film rights to some of their most valuable characters, including Captain America and the Avengers, were used as collateral. The filing explicitly states that if the films were not financially successful, the company could lose the film rights to some important Marvel characters. This wasn't a franchise with a stellar track record. The years leading up to Iron Man were littered with mediocre to bad Marvel-related films, many of which were licensed to other studios. I'm talking about films like 2003's Hulk and Daredevil, which had Rotten Tomatoes critic scores of 63% and 43% respectively, and both underperformed at the box office. Iron Man had a clean slate in a forgiving market. Let's turn our gaze over to the facts of the situation. Iron Man was released in 2008 when the superhero genre wasn't the dominant force it is today. As a result, the movie grossed a massive $319 million domestically and $585.8 million worldwide on a production budget of $140 million. Now let's fast forward to 2025. When Superman was released, the market was hostile, saturated, and tired. The DC brand itself was burdened by years of underperformance and public skepticism, which is a direct quote from the strategic report. This report highlights a string of underperforming DCU titles in the years leading up to 2025, which created a very real sense of superhero fatigue. The financial data underscores this incredible achievement. Superman had a production budget of at least $225 million, which is certainly higher. Despite this, it was the first superhero film of 2025 to fly past the $600 million mark at the global box office. This is even more impressive when you consider its direct competitors for the same year. Marvel's Captain America Brave New World topped out at around $415 million globally. Thunderbolts barely reached $382 million, and even the Fantastic Four First Steps, despite a solid domestic opening, only managed about $470 million worldwide. Superman's ability to succeed in this environment, and that's the key, is a far more difficult accomplishment. Before you think this is all about numbers, let's take a little bit more of a squishy look at what's going on. The creative approach. The report points out that Iron Man had the luxury of building a universe from the ground up, brick by brick. The filmmakers had to tell an origin story, which is a fairly straightforward narrative that wasn't prevalent at that time in the box office among all the different films that were being released in that era. Superman, on the other hand, did something more audacious and more modern. It skipped the origin story entirely. It immersed its audiences immediately in a lived-in universe. This is a direct quote from the report, and it highlights a superior, more efficient blueprint for a new cinematic universe model. It trusts the audience to understand the character and the world, and it respects their time, which is at a premium at this point in history. Now, the more we looked into the data, the more we looked at the report, the more we looked at substantiating information that was available from every verifiable source that we could find, it all led me to a particular question I think that I need to ask you and I need your input on. Can you name a single superhero film released in the last 2 years that was as creatively risky and commercially successful as Superman was? I think, if you really dig into it, maybe Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but even still, that comes sort of close because it was building on pre-existing franchises. I'm looking for something new, something fresh, something interesting, different. What do you think? Drop your answers in the comments below. All right, so we've looked at the financial numbers, we've looked at the critical reception. What about the audience? I mean, we matter the most, right? This is where the real knockout punch lands. Let's look at the numbers from audience sentiment. Iron Man earned a fantastic 94% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and a solid A from CinemaScore. Great, that's fantastic. There's no argument there. But Superman's numbers are, in a hostile market, even more impressive. The film has a near-perfect audience score of 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, making it the first Superman film in history to achieve such broad appeal among non-critics. Its critic score is 82%, okay, and crucially, this comes from nearly triple the number of reviews that Iron Man had in 2008. When you're dealing with brand fatigue and superhero fatigue, winning over an audience that is predisposed to be skeptical is the ultimate victory. Put another way, Iron Man had a pretty soft market to succeed in. Superman had to scrap and scramble for his life, and from what we can tell, he pulled it off. So let's do a little bit of compare and contrast to see how the stats line up. When it comes to the market, Iron Man had a clean slate in a forgiving market. There wasn't a lot going on. It was pretty much an open green field to do what you wanted. Superman had to fight a saturated, hostile market with brand baggage. Okay, so from a market perspective, Superman had a much tougher fight. Creatively, Iron Man used a standard origin story. That's a tried and true formula, but it's one that we've seen over and over again, and especially for Superman, which is effectively a reboot that's been done several times over, it's not a new story. Superman, therefore, by contrast, used a modern, lived-in universe blueprint. That's a creatively risky choice, but it's one that I think really respects the fans and the viewers for what they're looking for. Now let's move over to the finances. Iron Man launched a franchise with a huge bank loan on the line with the rights to valuable characters as collateral. In other words, it had to succeed or else Marvel Studios, or at the time they were doing a partnership with Paramount, would have been in big trouble. Superman achieved profitability while outperforming all 2025 competitors. It's not exactly apples for apples, but you have to incorporate the individual film into the landscape. So from that perspective, again, Superman had to fight with odds against it. Iron Man had more of an open field and I would say less pressure, financially speaking, to perform in a market that hadn't seen anything like it before. And then we come to audience trust. Iron Man earned an A from audiences in a fresh market. Superman earned a near-perfect 95% audience score in a cynical, fatigue-ridden market. Again, Superman had the uphill fight. Superman had the tougher battle, and yet Superman still achieved the same level of success as Iron Man, which had a much easier field to play in. The report concludes that Superman's success demonstrates a superior strategic resilience and adaptability, making it a more impressive and essential start for a new cinematic era for the DCU. So, while we all hold a special place in our hearts for the MCU, at least the first 3 phases anyway, and its humble beginnings, the objective, strategic analysis shows that the DCU's launch was a victory against far greater odds. It wasn't just a win for Superman, it was a knockout. And if you think that's a bold claim, just wait until we unpack the box office data on the next film. So in the increasingly eternal debate about who started off their universe better, Marvel or DC, right now, it's DC. But before you go away, do me a favor. Subscribe down below, hit that bell for notification, and leave me a comment. Which upcoming film, be it Marvel or DC, do you think is going to be the better, more successful superhero film? And if you're feeling a little bit anxious, why don't you include streaming shows in there as well, because I think Green Lantern is coming up. So, thank you very much for joining. Now go read comics, but read wisely. I'll see you the next time for more comical opinions.